Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome to the first Radical Kitchen of 2018. Radical Kitchen is a series of events, performances, workshops, and talks where over food we form connections, share stories, and make various exchanges. The home of the Radical Kitchen program is in the Pavilion, and this year we were super inspired by architect Frida Escobedo's idea of orienting this structure towards the Prime Meridian line in Greenwich. And so the 12 Radical Kitchen events of 2018 that will take place between now and September are all focusing on ingredients, foods, and elements that shape the map of empire. Today we're really excited. It's the first Radical Kitchen of the year, and it's a special one. The session will be led by an artist called Jasleen Kaur, who's been collaborating with long-term partners of the Serpentine, the Portman Early Childhood Centre, which is based just off of Church Street. Please join me in welcoming, our ingredient today is grain, but please join me in welcoming Jasleen, Alex, and Sue from the Portman.
Thank you, Amal. I just wanted to say a huge welcome to everybody from the Portman who has come down today. It's so lovely to finally have you here and to host you here, and we really appreciate it. I guess that we've been working with the Portman since 2014 now, through our Change in Play programme, where we've been inviting artists to collaborate with the parents, children and staff that come to the Portman Early Childhood Centre. Back in January of this year, Jasleen started her project with the drop-in part of the Portman with Sue and with the families who are here today. I shall pass over to you to...
Okay, thank you very much. Hello, thank you for coming. Portman Early Childhood Centre is a children's centre. It originally started from the Sure Start base from the government-led government funding, and now we run different services within the Portman. So we have a drop-in, like a stay and play, and we have a nursery-led, as well as linking in with other support networks, so around housing, around benefits, around different issues where we families can come and attend. So we've kind of been part of this project around making bread, sharing food, and what that means as being part of a community, and sharing it with each other. So parents have been coming up with different recipes, sharing from culture. So it could be one week Moroccan bread we're making, it could be Irish bread the next. And what that kind of means, and that importance of passing on traditions for families, and you know, that kind of sense of being part of a group, that you wouldn't necessarily kind of do things at home, but actually being part of that family network. So we've run quite a few sessions there. So then now it's our time to come to Serpentine and be part of the project here. I'll pass over to Jasleen. Thank you very much.
Hi, thanks everybody for being here, especially people from the Portman. We really appreciate you being here with us today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the project in depth, and today's going to be a kind of chance to almost turn what we've been doing in the Portman in quite a private space into more of a public event. And we want to share a little bit of the activities and the conversations and the things we've been talking about and thinking about and hearing from each other. We'd like to try and bring some of that into this space. So the afternoon's going to be a bit like this. We're going to, I'll talk a little bit about the project, and then we're going to split up into groups and have discussions, but also most importantly, we're going to feed ourselves. We've got some beautiful bread that Dwayne picked up from us off Church Street. There's lots of amazing local businesses. So we've got some bread, and we're going to share some bread together and have some conversations, and then regroup when it feels about right, and maybe just discuss and see what's been talked about. Just to kind of briefly introduce a bit about my practice, which is continually evolving. I work predominantly in objects and sculpture. I work a lot with groups of people, the first kinds of people that I worked with were my own family. And working in sculpture and objects, video, having conversations and cooking. And food was one of the things that I kind of started using really early on when I was studying at the RCA over about 10 years ago. And it was a way of kind of disrupting a formal space. That's how I was using it back then, about changing the formal etiquette of something or a particular space in a street, in a gallery. And more it's becoming a kind of a tool or a useful way, but also a really practical thing. Food as nourishment and food as a way of creating a conversation and of listening to people. And that's something that I feel like I just began to touch on when I started working with Alex and Gemma and the Serpentine. But I'm on this amazing kind of journey of thinking about what that actually means outside of an art, a kind of solitary art practice, which is, I guess, what's been expanding over the years. I've prepared something to read, which I'm going to read. I'm going to read to you. Do you want to have a seat, or do you want to? You can stay with me. That'd be nice. I'm not going to. Yeah, I'm not. Yeah. Yes, all right, if you want to. I feel like we should get you a seat because I'm going to sit down if that's okay. I'm going to read because there's so many parts of this project that kind of are still being thought about, and we're about midway in the project. So I apologise if it feels quite formal, but I hope it's gives you a sense of the kind of things that have been going on for us in the project. We are partway through a project together, based in the drop-in part of the Portman Centre, where my start point was to use the micropolitics of cooking and eating together to engage in the macropolitics concerning the site and the community of the Portman Early Childhood Centre. Early on, I discovered that the centre is an ecosystem, and the drop-in is a key link in this system, an initial point of contact that can support families in getting access to services, play spaces for children, ESOL classes, children and adult mental health clinic, breastfeeding clinic, domestic violence services, etc. It's a lifeline to so many living in the area, often from migrant communities and at continual risk by government cuts. In my practice, food is used as something social and political, so it was interesting to learn that the food served to the children and staff in the nursery is provided by an external company via Westminster Council called Caterlink. Chef Clinton, who originally was from the West Indies, cooks food on site in the centre's kitchen. Ironically, he applied for the job titled chef, but he's in a job where he prepares set meals on set days of set months from set recipes provided by Caterlink. The Tuesday that I met him, it was sweet and sour corn egg noodles, macaroni, cucumber and tomato slices, banana cake and custard. So yeah, a bit bland, and reminded me of the one night of the week as a child when we'd have English dinner, which was usually lasagna or Findus crispy pancakes. I quite like that I said Findus crispy pancakes in the Serpentine. It's not a sentence that's used much. Clinton and the staff seemed unenthusiastic about the food. The council-regulated food system felt broken and with so much more potential, especially as on another day, International Day, I was bombarded with plates upon plates of generously homemade biryanis, curries, baklava. This was not bland, neutral food. This was food from motherlands and mothers' hands. I tried to write down how many nationalities paraded down the catwalk in national dress. I counted 29, and I'm sure I missed quite a few. I learned about the community lunches of 2008, no longer due to cuts in funding, where parents would take it in turns to cook a meal and eat together. I learned about how many positives came out of this seemingly simple act. A cultural exchange from sharing recipes and ingredients, a space for adults and children to socialise and normalise food and eating for difficult eaters. It combated loneliness and depression, but most importantly, it provided a space to cook and a hot meal for those in need. As many of the users of the centre experience cramped or temporary living conditions, even homelessness. It was born out of creating a safe space, a second home for those families travelling great distances to the centre due to changes in their temporary accommodation. Some were travelling as far as Essex. Despite the temporary nature of the project and me being there, I wanted to use this project and the funding to restart those lunches. It might be worth mentioning here that for the duration of the research and the project, I'm continually thinking about the politics and the ethics of me as an artist working there. Are we just putting a sticking plaster on a wound caused by state deficit? How can this way of working tackle the huge structural and societal injustices? But it felt important to listen to these women, to cook and learn what recipes they hold dear to them, to create a group and a space for nourishment, knowledge exchange, slowness and activism. And I decided to focus on bread. I became interested in its politics, how the healthiest options are the most expensive and therefore middle class, and what happens when citizens are deprived of the simplest of food sources. Bread riots have been occurring regularly since the mid-1980s. This year in Egypt, where bread is known as Aish, meaning life, protests were sparked due to cuts in bread subsidies, having a dramatic effect on the bread rations of the average citizen. And Jane Harrigan of SOAS talks about links between food inflation and the Arab Spring, saying the food price spike was the final nail in the coffin for regimes that were failing to deliver on their side of the social contract. I grew up in a very white area of Glasgow. Outside of the house, I was Scottish, but when the house door shut behind me, I was well and truly Indian, Punjabi, Sikh, Asian, British Asian, or something. I could smell Mum's sabji down the street on the walk back from school, and so could the whole playground when I took paratha and a jar in my packed lunch. For me, cooking Punjabi food is a way of tending to my culture and my identity, be it dal roti for 500 in the Gurdwara or tarka beans for my white British husband. Raymond Williams talks about the early uses of the word culture as a noun of process, the tending of something, basically crops or animals, suggesting that culture is something that we do. We don't look at it through glass museum cabinets or from the upper stalls of a theatre. My culture is nourishing. I digest it. This knowledge is not printed in books. It is absorbed through seeing and doing over many years. It clings to me like the smell of masala does to my clothes and the stains of yellow turmeric does to my fingertips. Haja, a project member, said to me in the Portman kitchen one day, "We grew up in the kitchen. The kitchen is a place to have arguments and it's the place to resolve them. There's always drama in my kitchen." So, over the 10 weeks, we decided to set up a negotiated cooking class. Each week, we learned a recipe from someone in the group and cooked it, adults and children together. By cooking and eating Rakhaev, Harsha, Manakish, Batbut in their nursery, not just cookies and scones, I wanted to create a space for food that is not neutral, that is specific for their tongues. Seeing your identity reflected in places outside of the home is crucial. We'd make, cook and eat them from shared platters and have a conversation, somehow all in 2 small hours. Tweaking the sessions each week, we eventually established a democratic space for everyone to participate, share and be heard. And throughout the weeks, I found myself returning to 3 main questions. Can cooking and eating provide a space for listening? Can we build an internal system of nourishment and care? Can the micropolitics of cooking and eating at the Portman lead us into thinking about the macropolitics of the Portman as a site and the bodies that occupy that site? At the end of each session, we would spend some time asking questions and talking and listening together, responding to what came up by spending time together as a group. Some things I asked over the weeks were, how do you hold on to or pass down culture? How do you care? And how are you cared for? What are our concerns and how do we remedy? How do we make change together as a group of women? The conversations over the week went from polite and reserved to honest and reflecting the reality of their lives. They told us how in the UK people eat alone, not as a community, how bread is almost religious and to share it is part of their culture and religion, how about needing time to switch off from being a mother and be part of society, part of the world. Care was to be listened to be offered a cup of tea, having time to get a shower when home help comes once a week. How coming to Britain is like starting from zero. Of the racist slurs being spat on in the street and wearing hats instead of hijabs on Punishing Muslim Day. That women new to this country need support to rebuild themselves, to learn English, to have social conversations, not just in ESOL classes. That nursery is so expensive, where are our taxis going, how do I go back to work? The Portman is a political space, and so are the bodies that fill it. They do not exist in a vacuum. There are so many questions that have come up in this project. All this stuff being said, who needs to hear it? When letters to MPs don't work, what can we do collectively? How does a project like this become sustainable when it has an end date and the centre is at risk? How do we self-organise? How can we make change together as a centre, as a community, as a neighbourhood? And so at the moment, we are thinking of the next phase of the project, thinking about how this intimate, private session in the centre might go public, how something invisible might become visible, how our bodies collectively might take up public space as the government systematically works on the removal of them, how cooking can be an act of defiance and resilience, as sustaining identities and knowledge, nourishing ourselves and our young. I'm going to end on a quote that I read on artist Rohana Zaman's Instagram post that really stuck with me and kept returning throughout the project. It's a quote from the essay Mothering as Revolutionary Praxis by Cynthia Dewi Oka, which quotes bell hooks. For those who dominate and oppress us, benefit most when we have nothing to give our own, when they have so taken from us our dignity, our humanness, that we have nothing left, no home place where we can recover ourselves. I want to speak about the importance of home place in the midst of oppression and domination, of some place as a site of resistance and liberation struggle. Okay, thank you. In a moment, we're going to kind of replicate a version of what we've been doing together in the centre. So we're going to split up into 3 groups, I think, and we're going to eat together, and we're going to have some questions, the questions that we've been working through and thinking about together already. We're going to ask everybody to participate in thinking about and responding to these questions, and there's going to be some questions on big paper and some word cards, which was a kind of very basic technique and a way of focusing a conversation and giving people the kind of the ownership to respond or not respond to something. So you can use them how you want. You can pick them up and talk about something. You can decide to not talk about community and talk about mental health. It's up to you. We're going to eat and talk for about 20 minutes or so, and then the aim is to come back round into a big circle and maybe share some of the things that have come up. We are being recorded, but the conversations aren't going to be recorded. We might make some notes on the paper, but that's purely just to record something so that we can feed back as a group later. Nothing's going to be taken and used elsewhere. I think, there might be nuts in the breads. There might be sesame seeds. So if you have a nut allergy, just wanted to flag that up. Is that everything? Amazing. We're going to somehow get you into groups. So, yeah. So we wanted to kind of replicate a small sense of what we were doing in the Portman, in the pavilion. So after explaining a bit about the project, we split up into groups, and we were asking the same questions and using the same techniques to kind of hold a conversation through eating together and having questions and word cards to kind of shape or direct a conversation and to allow people to feel like they could or could not talk about a certain subject. So we kind of replicated that in the pavilion and invited people who are new to the project to take part in some of those conversations. It was so nice that we had a few families come today, some women with their children, and that they felt comfortable enough to speak in smaller groups, but also to the wider public about some of the concerns of the places that they live and work in and their children live in. Really important things that I think coming from me or reading on a bit of paper doesn't quite have the same effect or impact than coming from the actual person that it's affecting.